Hey everybody, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and in this very important episode of the program, it's time for a completely fair, completely analogous, completely quantifiable comparison of the Star Wars sequel trilogy by Disney. My daughter made this for me out of perler beads, and I kind of love it. And the Bible by God. So the Star Wars sequel trilogy is theoretically the most master-planned thing in the history of film, or it should have been. But Star Wars is the biggest pop culture phenomenon in the history of pop culture. It's the third trilogy out of three trilogy. There'll probably be a few spoilers here, by the way, so if you still haven't seen The Rise of Skywalker and you want to catch this later, I totally understand. First trilogy happened in the 70s. We all feel nostalgia for it. Second one, the prequel trilogy, happened in the 2000s. It kind of got lampooned and panned pretty hard, but you know, it was fun in its own way. And then Disney bought the franchise, and they decided, we are going to map this thing out. We're going to throw money at it. This thing is literally a pile of gold. Yeah, literally a pile of gold waiting for them on the other end of making this trilogy. And so you would think that they would write out, with all of their money and their ability to hire the best writers and the best story people, you would think they would write out one master plan for what they're going to do with the whole thing. But if you go and Google this stuff, you realize, no, that didn't happen. Despite the fact that everybody's alive at the same time, everybody can go to the same office, everybody can communicate electronically and think this thing through and cover every single plot hole and eventuality and character arc, they just didn't do that. And instead, you had one guy take care of the first one, and another guy take care of the second one, and somebody else, well, the same guy as the first guy, took care of the third one. And what you got is, frankly, respectfully, kind of a jumbled mess. The good guys don't really make a lot of sense. They don't really have character arcs that need to be fulfilled. Rey, the main good guy, good gal, I guess is that how I would say it, she is kind of a Mary Sue. She doesn't really have any problems. If she has a problem, she just digs down deep inside and solves it with force magic that nobody else has ever had in the history of the thing. That's really problematic. Finn doesn't actually do anything in any of the movies. Poe is a hothead who's just there for, you know, jumping in with explainer language at the beginning, and he's exactly the same character at the end. Princess Leia, General Leia, she doesn't really develop or become anything different, which is difficult when you have to CGI her back from the grave. You don't tend to get the most emotionally riveting performances. The problem is, the most interesting and compelling character in the whole sequel trilogy is Kylo Ren, the sort of bad guy. And Adam Driver kills it in that role. And every time he's on screen, it's really engaging and interesting because you genuinely feel like here's somebody in conflict, and how is this going to play out, and what evil might this person we're rooting for perpetrate? And I really think they got this character right in a lot of ways, but when they got him wrong is he's the best character and he's not the point of view character. We have a Mary Sue for the point of view character, and the broken, twisted, tortured, interesting character is only on screen from time to time when it suits to move the plot forward for the others. And then on top of that, there's just plot details like, where did the bad guys even come from? Who are these bad guys? Who's Snoke? Does it even matter? The Emperor's back now? What? Where do they get all of these like generals and admirals and lieutenants to man these obviously evil spaceships with such enthusiasm when we just went through this like 10 or 15 years ago? Don't you guys remember how bad the Empire was? And where'd you get the money for all of this stuff? And then on top of that, who's the Resistance? And what are the principles that bind them together? What's the stuff that really, if they were in charge of society, they would clearly do that would make things better and different? Like, I don't know. They're just more attractive and quirky, I guess. They don't blow up planets, but that's a pretty low standard in terms of what we want from our heroes. I would hope all of us would avoid the temptation to blow up a planet if we were given the opportunity. So that stuff doesn't make sense. And then because there's not a cohesive plan, we're introducing all of these plot devices and elements like special space wizard magic force powers that, did we not know that these things existed in the past? It kind of retroactively wrecks a whole bunch of other scenarios that we've seen and kind of cherished from more coherent previous installments of Star Wars. And then on top of that, you got the famous lightspeed kamikaze incident from the Last Jedi. And then the next director, J.J. Abrams, has to like explain that away and hand wave it in a couple of scenes and lines. It's almost like the directors are fighting against each other. And if you really think about it, I don't think you actually have to watch Episode 8, The Last Jedi, for any of this to even make sense. I think J.J. Abrams, who did 7 and 9, made 9 in such a way that 8 doesn't have to exist, and maybe someday history will forget it. Or maybe it's a really nice story and you really enjoyed it. If that's the case, I don't want to be your enemy because I've been wrong about movie opinions and other things before. What I see for sure is that there really does seem to be, and a well-documented appearance of being, a lack of cohesion, even though there was every opportunity to write a cohesive story with cohesive themes, with cohesive plot direction, with cohesive character motivations and character arcs. And those things just aren't there. You might like the movie anyway, but those are certainly not the strengths of the movie. And I think most of us could agree on that. Okay, the Bible by God. Wow, this is a really different deal because there was no get-together here. Most of the people who wrote this didn't live at the same time as most of the other people who wrote this. It was written over 1,500 years, or if you want to go with the most generous estimate, a lot of people think that maybe it was written over like 500 or 600 years. It was written in 3 different languages. It was composed in all different corners of the world in completely different political and social situations, addressing what you would figure would be very different concerns. But unlike Star Wars, where you had the opportunity to master plan, the Bible, where the opportunity wasn't there to master plan, has one cohesive main character, God. It has one cohesive plot structure, creation, fall, redemption. God is the main character walking us through this entire story. It has cohesive human characters who are usually either inconsequential or tragic in that they can't overcome that fallenness part of the plot that affects them so darkly, or they do overcome that by trusting in God or their relationship with God or the miraculous work of God. And then they become sort of heroes in the story, but never displacing the main character, who is God. You've got infinitely cohesive themes throughout. The sovereignty of God, the authority of God, the kingdom of God, the values of the kingdom of God. And in that, you have really clear motifs about right and wrong and what makes sense. And it's woven into the subtle parts of the story and the explicit parts of the story in ways that, again, a master plan, incredibly well-funded, corporate-backed, focus grouped, analyzed, biggest series of movies ever couldn't get right with everything working in its favor. Bottom line is this. I know that there are a lot of people watching this who do not share opinions with me about Star Wars. We both like it. That's at least good. I want Star Wars to work out. I understand that I do not share the same opinion with many of you about whether there's even a God behind any of this, let alone whether the Bible is a good book or reliable. But this is empirical data. This document is the most printed, most sold, most circulated, most staying-powered document in the history of humankind. You can only argue so far that that's the result of power and manipulation and force. At some point, people are just signing up for this, man. At some point, people look at this and they see something that is cohesive, that is thematically clear, that has some sort of moral impetus that makes sense, that has characters they can relate to for better, for worse, and that has a main character that is exceptionally compelling in this being that holds himself out as being the origin of all the stuff that ever happened ever. I think it's a remarkable contrast between the height of our achievement of recent epic blockbuster filmmaking and our inability to put together, even though everything is going in its favor, a cohesive answer to all the basic questions of a great story, and the odds being completely stacked against the effectiveness of the Bible, and it's still working out to be the amazing thing that it turned out to be. All right, let's have some fun in the comment section. I can't wait to hear from the people who think I'm completely nuts. I look forward to hearing from maybe a few of you who think that I might be onto something one way or another. Whatever the case, I like gaming this stuff out with you where we don't just talk about the actual nuts and bolts of the text. I really obviously enjoy that too. But I like thinking through how all of this is unfolded throughout history and how it continues to unfold even in our cultural moment where you and I are on the stage of history and you and I get to wrestle through the big, important, hard questions of life. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. I really do appreciate you, and we'll catch you soon.